Nyeba gunle namdol shing yende gunge genba bo semche gunge nye jekbun tamje genla gun janze Omen joge yenge potane desuma sange gunge ngobo nye rasem jogo ngasuma denzebe Sawe lame shabla so wande 담비체 냠술렘비 꿀롱상보 니중기 삼바탕 자주기 셈 드닌당아랑 주즈 제게랭라 룽기 최디 대삼기 거니 냠수 랭기 인 삼비 삼바탕 템베 담비체 셈바르슈
The excellent motivation in which we practice the Dharma, it consists of both renunciation and the mind directed towards enlightenment or bodhicitta. And so for the next hour, I invite you to please give rise to the motivation which thinks, for this hour I will listen and contemplate the Dharma of Scripture.
nanganzu chedi nyamsu lembala lamgi rimba chila teni nyamlin china yabu yungu yobe songsanda nganzu lamgi rimba di tanda chaji malam nala teni delbi koni ani dus ma shugure.
When it comes to practicing the sublime Dharma, one goes about practicing the path, the stages of the path, the progress along the path. So we have to rely on a path in order to practice the Dharma. And if we do that, then things will be successful, essentially. Be successful in our practice. And when it comes to the stages or the progression along the path, we're currently talking about it in connection with the words given in the Mahamudra Aspiration prayer. And so we've talked about that a little bit before.
Tatela tensen namba ngada busiye benang teni lamgi tendang lam toje gi Sherap dang ani lamgi ngodi da kasang kong de shusini ta dering deni shiba ta tende ki manor matul bil lam di nyamlen chena ani nyamlen gi rimba di kande sitto ku gre sini shiba di dire ta tini mangi nega kashi shugins.
The Mahamudra Aspiration prayer has 5 main points, elements to it. And the first 3 we've discussed before, the first 3 being the support that was required in order to engage with the practice, engage with the path. The wisdom which recognizes and realizes what the path is, realizes how to actually enter into the path. And then the third is the essence of the path, what makes the path the path. So those are the first 3. Now we're moving on to the 4th main principle or point of the prayer, which is the path, we could say the authentic path, the unerring path, the correct path. And what we mean by that is how do we enter the correct, unerring path? How do we do that? So there's a couple important points about this that I'd like to make.
단디난디니 당보디 따디기 아주 람차상기 dom시다고 줄 가르송요래서나 프레임워크라고 들어와 장시 심리 살동 송죽라 종제 차진 돌제 날줄제 장제 루브 출빈 대만남 장텐 디달 주고 문유르쇼 송발에
So, when we talk about the path, we also need to mention the framework of that path. And when we talk about the framework, the structure of the path, the 7th verse in the Mahamudra Aspiration prayer summarizes what we mean by the framework of the path. So, I'll read it. The basis of purification is mind itself, the unity of luminosity and emptiness. The means of purification is the great Vajra Yoga of Mahamudra. What is to be purified is the temporary stains, or are the temporary stains of confusion. May we manifest the result of purification, the stainless Dharmakaya.
That ding on Zutini Chidang number Sanje Beke Lam Chasang di Rimbati Tini Rotanti Chipachikana Tegaran Re Shijiore Lam Jiore Lam Deki Pangja Jiore Tini Lam Deki Pangja Ti Pangwa Zowal Tini Jibuji Yungurwa and Chidang Dadi number Sanje Beke Tumongi Lamgare Nyamsilingi Domshi Tegaran Re Chipare.
When we talk about the Buddhist path and the framework which constructs, which supports the path, it's pretty much the same. In general, we can talk about there's an underlying common structure that underlies all of Buddhist practice. That is the ground, then the path itself, and then within that we talk about what needs to be abandoned, what needs to be let go of or surrendered. And if we do that correctly, if we completely discard all the things that need to be abandoned, then that gives rise to the result. So this is the common structure that we find within all Buddhist practice, so to say, the Buddhist path.
Da redde yene yang tangwe su nganzu nyamlen che yong be kapsula pena dotang ngak tene dola yang rimba yore ngala yang rimba mangpo yore denzo kapsula ma di chikba yimba kan shikla tene nyamlen che yong de ta nganzu ina sabiki kepardi yunguare ngama lateni dini chima denzo tawadi sabrududi rangshingi gombadian sabrudugu yabandi jobadian samon chatu dini chigi nambala kepar chimbo yorela dini nang gomyong bekapsu gongdang kita lam tapsi kepar chen dendeki zisinda masingi dendeki dini ngazo dodang ngalayantini gyude shila soba dendeki keba yungo ore.
So that's what we can say about the common underlying structure is that framework. When we actually go about the practice of the path, however, we can talk about the unique, the individual structural features of, for example, the sutra, the sutric vehicle versus the tantric vehicle. And again, the underlying structure is the same. The framework is the same. However, there's differences with regard to the profundity, or how profound the view is with regard to a certain path. Of course, so as one stage of practice or one framework leads into the next, and that's the way it is. But when it comes to actually synergizing that or embracing that with a view which is more profound, then that essentially changes or influences or makes more profound, say, the meditation, and vice versa, as well as that makes the conduct as well more profound. Maybe the outer appearance might be a little different, or it could be the same, but with the embracing of a more profound view, we see slight characteristic changes between the different kinds of frameworks that we see within the Buddhist path.
Ta deyang dini nganzu ngone dani chue nyamlin chegen chemba yina ta dola rimba ta nga rimba chasang di ji galwa maimba dini kenza na shinchi rwa nganzu kenza yala zegni saja chila lepko go dini kenza chasang za chumbo rwa za chumbo re ma do kenza chik za chumbo re kenza chik di za chumbo re ma lap kha ko re ina ya ngara zo lamga la dobe kapsula dini ko ngama de la komba jamni ya ngama de le tang ni chima de ya doku ko rwa o tende chungo de la nga zo da ne gyuru se go re.
As practitioners of the path, there are, or with regard to the path itself, there are different kinds of stages and steps of progress, process that comes with, say, the sutric vehicle versus the mantrayana or the vajrayana secret mantra vehicle. And it's important to recognize that the sutric way and the tantric way aren't contradictory. They're not in. It's not that they're not in harmony. It's just that they're kind of like a staircase. There's steps that one progresses along, and each of those steps is as important as the other. Right? You need to have each of the steps in order to progress further. So it's not that one step is more or less important than the other. But it is the case that as you go up the steps, you have to let go of the previous one and enter into and engage with the next. So in the same way, we have to. There's the stages of the path that once we are finished with, we let go of, and then we progress to the next of the steps.
nganzo nga Gyud nyingma ki chebek cheba ina tekba rimba gu sani shakarwa rimba dawa dela.
Within the Nyingma view, the Nyingma tantric view, we talk about 9 vehicles or 9 stages.
Ta dordina ngaranzo ki 장시 ki semki namdo de changwala lamsanji yungu yo mare ko gyun ringbuji la rimba shindo doku gu yore ani semjingi wangbo se de chasan chikpa yungu yo mare susu ki ledang meba dang kalpa la teni wangbo dame de yungu yo ba intu tini tawa samma sabki kepa la teni tini kumbala kebardan dega na shingi chobala kebardan dega na shingi tini tanyi dinzu sik dun so beje tang tang den so tini minda ba tini lep de gore.
So when we talk from for example, the sutric perspective, or in general, when we talk about the path, there's the basis of purification, right? The basis of purification, which we say is the mind or the consciousness or thoughts. These aren't immediately. This basis isn't immediately purified. It takes time. There's a process of going through the purification of the basis. And the way that we do that is through the steps in going through the process of the path. And that's not the same for everybody, because everyone has different, we could say, capacities. And those capacities depend on certain kind of proclivities, interests, certain things that one likes and doesn't like, even fortune maybe, or we could say having the fortune to meet with certain teachings rather than others, as well as the difference of profundity when it comes to the view, right? And this profundity, as we said, it influences when it's embraced. It influences the meditation as well as the conduct. And so these are all very different things that they look different. The path looks different, maybe to certain kind of people at certain kinds of times, as well as certain terminology is used in certain cases, all corresponding to the profundity of the view at hand.
Ta pena nga zu tanda chache malam narang la sung yore. Ije dalwa tela, ije dalwe ki chani chakya chambos, tadang dalwe ki chani uma chambos. Ta dende gen dona tham je di ani yongsun zog de yebe chani zogwa chambos ne. Ta namje nga zu uma chambo, chakya chambo, zogwa chambo saya de. Nilu gu ngoy ne ta kaga yo marwa. Rete ine yang nilu di gom yong di tobe ke tap de la tani kansa khorang ke wangbola tani tap minda yung ko ora de la tani ming de so minda yung to wa.
For example, in the Mahamudra Aspiration prayer, we have one verse that mentions the different kinds of kind of higher vehicles. It says that Mahamudra is freedom from mental doing, mentality or mental doing, and Madhyamaka, or the middle way, is the freedom from all extremes, and the Dzogchen view, or the great perfection, is the embraces all. It has all subsumed within the great view of Dzogchen. And so we have these different terms that we're using, but when we the nature that each of these vehicles or kind of maybe ways of going through the path, they're all pointing to the same nature. However, based on the fortune, the capacity, the interest, the proclivities, the karma of the individuals at hand, these vehicles were presented in order to meet the needs of all those different individuals. And so, while they might have different names, the very ground or what they're pointing to is the exact same nature.
Tene tendegi nilu di gombe ko gomdang shorwa. Gomdang de la ta chaldun titus minda ba yung ko re. Tela tene that uma chajen zojen said.
And again, how are they different? They're different from the perspective of the method of meditation, how one goes about practicing. And those different methods are emphasized differently in the, for example, the Mahamudra path, the middle way path, or the great perfection path.
Da dordina ta tanda nga zu de gi da di zo de da nga zu chagya chenpo ki da chagya chenpo sana de gi zo nga da de wi gi ni 장시 정제 장자 장제 된 줄라 자니 숭용 거라 와 가수 바바디.
Currently, in the context of what we're doing now, we're learning via the Mahamudra aspiration prayer. And when we say Mahamudra here, we can also just equate that with the more the tantric or the secret mantra or Vajrayana path. And within that, we have these three points, or these three elements that we're talking about regarding purification: the basis of purification, the means of purification, and that which is to be purified. So these three things are emphasized.
시슬람나 되그래. 장시, 정제, 장자, 장외대부.
Okay. Oh yes. Yeah, so the four, pardon me. The basis of purification, what is doing the purification, or the means of purification, what is to be purified, as well as the result of that purification. These four.
다 디츠디 약보여래. 단당한주 단 gyulama 장배 값을라 gyulama 기 슝용조 되더니 주 루루다버지 써봐이나 측지 되게 나라 할람 지더니 루루 써도 그래. 된다게 내가디.
I find this a particularly good verse. It's a very nice verse because it, for example, it subsumes, it completely embodies the entire Uttara Tantra Shastra, the supreme continuum sutra that our Maitreya Sutra. It completely subsumes the Gyud Lama into these four lines, and I find it to be very helpful.
Tadi nani pena Gyud Lama di nani da Gyud Lama ki jojo zo di tanda tela 당부지도 와 장지당 차상 요래 장자 종대 차상까지 시그래 이내야 조어디 가르에서는 장시 셈니 살동 송죽라 세지도 와 어다 데리더니 귤라마긴 저저 조어디 차대 버래.
And out of these four lines, it really, what's emphasized in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, the Gyud Lama, is particularly this first line, the basis of purification. The main point, the main subject of the Uttara Tantra Shastra really emphasizes and really focuses in on this basis of purification. As the line says, the basis of purification is mind itself, the unity of luminosity and emptiness.
Tade nani kyanteni pinpoint chebaina Gyud Lama dige garidshi jagoresana semni salse tsikjido wa semgi ngowodi wesalware se ta Gyud Lama ge joja chasangdi o dinaladini dirugorda wesalwa yimbe yinsudi.
And when we talk about the Uttara Tantra Shastra, it emphasizes the basis of purification, but in particular, it really pinpoints what is said here, the unity of luminosity. This word luminosity, or selwa in Tibetan, this idea of luminosity, sometimes as well as cognizance, is particularly focused on in the Uttara Tantra Shastra.
다 chidang chitel taw samlo tangba ina ngaran zola shi yebe nani jangshi di khare reslam na jangshi di ngaran zola yebe ki sem ki ngowo ani ngowo 다 랑신 살와 ngowo tongbasana digre semgi 랑신 살와 당 ngowo tongba 대한테니 대녀부지 타데드 메바 숭주지요레스 semgi 내루지 네 가르레스나 장시레 숭바레
So when we really piece apart the words that are spoken in this line, the unity of luminosity and emptiness. So, in particular, the essence of mind, the essence of all of our minds. We ask, first of all, well, what is the basis? What is the grounds on which we're going to purify? And it's as it's stated here, the grounds in which we're going to purify is our own minds, that being the nature of the mind. And here we have this emphasis on luminosity. We can also say the mind itself, its nature is cognizant, or its nature is luminous or luminosity, and its essence is empty or emptiness. And the point here is that these two qualities aren't different. They're not separate, but rather they're indistinguishable. They're, as it says here, the unity of luminosity and emptiness. So this is the nature of the mind. This is the reality of the mind, and this is what we are. This is the basis in which we are purifying.
당한수 남규인 Gyud Lama kapsula diladini kamam Gyud Dewar shaping yingbusni sunguraba dondachi bare. Teni 당한수 wasal semyang segre. Teni nimaki kapsula teni shi kundo sangboyan segore tenzula.
Within the Uttara Tantra Shastra, the Gyud Lama, the nature, this luminosity, this nature of the mind is equated with the dhatu, or the element, which in other words is what we call Buddha nature. So it's the same meaning, right? So what we call the Buddha nature in Uttara Tantra Shastra, the Gyud Lama, is the same thing that we have described here as the unity. And so we call this the mind which is luminous, the mind which has this luminous quality, and within the Nyingma view, we can also equate that with what we call the ground, which is Samantabhadra, the ground which is Kundusangpo.
Teni da jangshi di pe gechumbare. Jangshi di mena ngaranzo ki jongje ki jangba ine jangtuku mare songbare. Jangshi di yoba songsa teni ngansu ki jongje la ten ba ina jangja di jangtuku re sene ta Gyud Lama di yongzo di ta te chi lungdang rigba dang pela soba mambu ki kone rangshin semjen tam je ki Gyud la ani dedabu ki Dewar shepi nyingbu di yore jeza ani nganzu lamla loba ina goba yore lobna ya sanji koban top tu re se kita tawaji ni dini ke ngore confident tawaji.
This ground of purification is necessary. It's incredibly important, in that without it, the methods which go about purifying, the means of purification. If the mind wasn't, if we didn't have this grounds of purification, then there would be no point in actually going about the practice of purification, because we couldn't do it. There would be no grounds for the purification. That there is a ground for purification if we apply the methods, the methods which are the means of purification, then we can purify. It's as simple as that. In the Untitled Chapter, the Gyud Lama, it really emphasizes this point, where it gives lots of reasonings, it gives lots of scriptural citations that express all sentient beings, without exception, within the minds of sentient beings. They all have this Buddha nature. And because they have the Buddha nature, if they progress on the path, if they enter and then practice the path, then they can attain liberation. They can go through the process of purification and then, as a result, attain enlightenment. And so this is the view. This is what we talk about, generating the view, which we could also say is generating confidence in this process.
당한주 신가 딱긴지나 당보 됐다 사분디 고그러봐 사분디 연한 따더니 주로 가르쳐봐이네 걸려가 제여봐 제바디 된여봐 차그러봐 다 사분 코라 매바이는데니 아주 제 톱게 말이라 제바디 타직도 되니 된여봐 차 마셔서는 된여봐 차 녀봐여 말아 된여봐 차그 말해 단단한 아주 장시 세디 되네 저래 장시 셈니 사둔 송주도 여발라 여발 뭐셔봐미 이제 제도 바이나 당 아주 싱발라 지 사분이 약보지 녀바나 진실 니 메나데니 가와 가살랑 아주 출록돼 버서로 싫어 사분 가와 예매 하마고 되니 가와 가살 출록돼 바이나 사분 메사게 살라 로망보 출록 바이네 주 가르세 로도 깨기 말아 니 인디 따디 내가 좀 보지 지겨래 ngotö said manazo chajin zojen kapsula ngotö 세시로 와 당아주 총잡아이나 당뭐 말자지 고고도 와 말자면은 총잡아요 말아 봐 어때나 신실에 송발에 따들라야한테니 따왜 ngotö 봐 시겨래
We can think about, say, a farmer. A farmer, in the beginning of their farming, when the beginning of their planting, they have to have the seeds, right? If they have the seeds, then they can go about planting those seeds, watering them, adding fertilizer, doing all the work that is necessary as a farmer to grow their crops. And that process of working has meaning. There's fruit that will come from that process. Why? Because we have the seed. Without that seed, you could do all the work, you could pour the water, you could add the fertilizer, but in the end, because there wasn't an actual seed to begin with, the work is fruitless, literally, right? And so the ground, the basis of purification, is mind itself, the unity of luminosity and emptiness. We need to have trust in that. We need to have confidence in that. Just like a farmer has confidence in farming when they have the seeds necessary in order to produce their harvest, right? For example, if you don't know the seed, if the seed is there or not, and you're not relying on this confidence or this trust in that there is a seed there to be grown, you could be watering here and there. You could be watering in a place with no seeds for 100 years and nothing would happen, right? Because there's no initial seed to then grow the harvest. So what is this? What are we talking about here? This is what we call the introduction, the pointing out, we could say. We talk about this in the Dzogchen and the Mahamudra context a lot. For example, you could also talk about a business, right? You need capital. You need to have something that you can invest in. If you don't have something to invest in or no capital, then how are you going to actually start a business? So this is the view. And this is what we call introducing or pointing out the view.
답변은 아주 싱바 미니 여바제. 되니 미치기 당 아주 사분줘요 봐. 사분데 가와 예면 켜네 하마고 바제. 되니 추지다 류지 켜네 로망보 가와 가살라 룩데 바이나. 봐. 쳐다라고 지네. 아니 미치기 사분데 가와 예면 세브 하고 용데 값을라 사분 여사데가나 따다 줄로 용배 값을라 고준이 그 데블레 개바 좀 보시오신 거라 와 사분 가와 여바 ngotrekeng 미디기 줄룩사데 사자직라 룩네 뒤지 통통질라 데부 첨바지 용토 거래 다하 먹게 미디게 되네 아 이런 릉불라 깔레 망버지 갸바이네 깔레데 갸고요 와 이네야 사분당 추니데 따다지 마테밤 사분 여바데 거기 뭐 마테바인데 데부 연구면도 와 디인데당 아주 까규닝말라 ngotreseide 짜첨버지데 김진데라고 싫어도 와 개바데네 좀 보여라다 ngotre다 마트세데 디인데다 nganzula 미지기 용니 사분데 델라드레도 다스네 주구주게 미지요나 다디 미디 빼 짜쳐 보러 와 가진 쳐 보러 와 디인데네 nganzu기 라마데 오네다네 연된 산제군나 냠나야 가진 산제베 양 라바연세디 디네 질롱 거진 지거 사분데 델라둑 스네 ngore 지간 라마 차데 거라 와 디인데 라마데네 짜쳐 보 시부지 김진데레 더디나 라마당 라밍 어드당 진랍라테네 뒤스 통통직라 룩데 네드 멤버 야청버지 라와 당 아주 체직 류지라 상계 세그라와 데니지 용토고야
For example, think about two farmers, and it all comes down to the seed, right? So one of the farmers, they don't know where the seeds are. They don't know where to really water, where to put the fertilizer, but they're going the work. They're doing the work, right? They're kind of testing things out. They're just kind of guessing at where seeds may or may not be, and they're expecting their farming. That's how their farming should go, right? That's the process that they're taking. Then the second person, they know exactly where the seeds are. They know exactly where to water and to put the fertilizer. These two are going to have very different results, right? For example, the one that knows where the seeds are, in a very short time, they'll have a great result from the efforts that they put in. They don't even have to put a lot of effort in. They know exactly where the seeds are, and they can apply water and fertilizer, etc., to those exact places. On the other hand, the other farmer who has no idea where the seeds are, it goes through a lot of effort. They don't know where it is. Essentially, they haven't been introduced to where there is or is not a seed. And so they're not going to have any results from this kind of willy-nilly effort that comes with not being introduced to where the seeds are. And so that's why in the Kagyu and Nyingma traditions they emphasize the incredible importance that comes with this introduction, this pointing out, and why the person that does this, the person that can pinpoint, show directly, introduce you directly to the foundation or this grounds of purification, this grounds of the nature of mind, is incomparable. that person is said to have uncomparable kindness, unparalleled kindness. That's why we say the Lama. This is the Lama that does this. The Lama that makes this introduction to the student. The Lama is equal in qualities, even more so than the Buddha, because they are the ones that directly introduce this to the student, the seed, the grounds, the nature of the mind. And it's because they can do this, and because they do this, that we consider them to be incredibly kind and give so much emphasis on the Lama. And so in summary, it's the presence of the Lama, the act of the introducing, and then the blessings as well. The blessings as well are necessary. When those three come together and then introduce the student to this ground, then in a very short time there'll be a great result. That's why we say in this path you can attain the greatest result, which is Buddhahood, in just a very short time, just a single lifetime.
Pena Shingbaki Sapun Kawala Yume Ngotre Chekentang Sapun Ngotre di Naga Chumba Shibuji Yamana Shinchene, then as a lam to be capsule, Jiangxi, Ani thinking Lama Dang, Ani Jiangxi Rangi, Ngotre dita, Naga Chumbachilla, Sigure.
So again, when we compare the two farmers, the one that doesn't know where the seeds versus the one that does know where the seeds are, the second one is they've been introduced. They know. They've been pointed out to where the seeds are and are not. So this knowing, this introduction is what we call recognizing the ground of purification. And it is the Lama, the Guru, that does this introducing of the mind, of the grounds of purification. And that's why there's so much emphasis and importance impressed in tradition regarding the Lama.
Tene da jongje di ta jangshi di tende na ta jongje di kare re islam na tene chakya Khenpo da ani najur Khenpo raba tenzure songbare ta chajing najur ke lam tenzure songbare.
So we've talked about the grounds of the purification, or the basis of purification. So what are the means of purification? And here the line states it is Mahamudra, right? And more so we talk about the great yoga. So the means of purification is stated to be the great Vajra yoga of Mahamudra.
Najidang anzu chasing ke lam di chasang di jongje chagarwa. Tene chasing ke lam la tene rimba mangbo yore. Dang onro je tene ngoshi la ta chidang shine dang lakdong sene tene yongore. Dadi shine lakdong sene namji ngazu kame shide lakdong tabuda mare. Chasing kwarang ke shine lakdong tenzo yu te jongje chagare. Da tene yang ngak tang ngazu ngaki chasing la soba dang dewanen tene dorje najuru sebe kapsoda wang shu ani tab gebe rimba Sherap zobe rimba tene nyamle mabu cheyarwa a tenzu chasang de karicha goresana dende kin jangshi di jongre chebegi ani ta doji chachen da nga chachen sina mindu tumona tumoma imbege lam nyamle mabu yarwa chasang de karen jongje se de chade gore. 도 지당 투몽 도케지 셰바이는 달람 차진 검스리 신이 돈 lak동세 리만이 가는 주고도 와. 되니 양 주다 디가랑아 계지 자리용도 되니 게림당 조림당 레비용으로 와. 그래서 차상대도 종제차게 그래. 뒤인데 차게 좀 돌진 날 줄을 수도 있어만.
So in this context, right, we're talking about the Mahamudra aspiration prayer. As the line states, the means of purification is the great Vajra Yoga of Mahamudra, right? So the entire path of Mahamudra, we could say, are the means of purification within this particular context. Within the Mahamudra path, there are, again, within it, several stages, several processes that bring one along the path, that progress one along the path, and consisting of the preliminaries as well as the main part, which is in this context we would call shamatha and vipassana, or calm abiding and clear insight meditation. But when we talk about this particular kind of Mahamudra, shamatha or vipassana, it's not what we've been talking about in the recent classes, but it's unique, particular to the path of Mahamudra. And so we also have this word Vajra, right? Within the with the tantric perspective, the Vajra, this symbol of the Vajra is what kind of represents, what symbolizes the tantric path, the Vajra Yana path. And the yoga, which is essentially that which brings about the perfection of the wisdom that is associated with the Mahamudra path. And in general, we can talk about, and so again, when we talk about this yoga or this meditation, in through and through, more on a very common level, or on a shared level, we talk about shamatha and vipassana. But in particular, within the Mahamudra path, we talk about meditation or shamatha and vipassana with regard to the development and the completion stages suited to the Vajrayana vehicle. So there's a little bit of difference here with regard to what we call meditation.
Teni ta jangja di kariresana teni sumba lubur tulbi timasana ta chidang dajin denjin mangbal sha chugo inanda chajen kapsula zogodi ta denla meshin tu marik patan tulbi wangi jungsha begi teni sunwa tang zimban na begi nizin yorwa o denjula ta 가리세거스는 로브 툴비티마 시고래.
The third line states, what is to be purified? What is to be purified is are the temporary stains of confusion. And when we talk about these temporary stains of confusion, in general we talk about clinging to a self, believing that a self exists, or believing or clinging to things as truly existent. In particular, within the Mahamudra context, we talk about the duality, right? And that duality we can define as that which is not truly there, but due to the ignorance, or due to ignorance, it's what duality is imputed. And duality in this case means the object clung to in relation to the mind which clings, right? So this is the duality that we're talking about, object versus subject. And it's this particular kind of clinging to duality that is emphasized within the Mahamudra path.
다 장시 semni wesalla jangja lobur gi tulbi timate deep de yorte hinayang lobur gi chulu deep de yore slaba da di lobur se sikdala mixe ki goalang gi chore ani dega absola lobur se di khandela ko waresana nangchulla dipata to nangba hinayang ni chulla ani semki ranshin wesawe ki shila dima de tsawa nyini dini magyo batang semki ranshin wesawa di dime ki ngola magyo batang dima de semki ranshin wesawe ki ngola tsani gyuryo mare sini da degi gowa di yungo de kapsul lubur sedi dima lubur ba sedi.
So the ground again is this unity of luminosity and emptiness, or this luminous cognizance that is the ground of the mind. And on top of that are these, as it says here, these temporary stains of confusion, these temporary stains which we could say obscure, the obscuring temporary stains. And so on top of this luminosity, which is the ground of the mind, there are these temporary stains which are obscuring it, right? And so what we need to pay attention particularly to here is this word temporary, right? So, and we can talk about it from two perspectives. From an apparent perspective, the way that it looks, the way that it appears that these stains are obscuring the nature of mind, obscuring this luminosity. But in actuality, so on the other side, in contrast to the way things appear, the way things actually are, is that the nature of mind is luminous, is this luminous cognizance. And that ground has never at all been sullied or stained by these temporary obscurations. The luminosity itself has never been altered or changed due to being obscured by these stains.
Tene shibata jangde ditini kararesana tende ki jangshi semnil la yobe ki lubur ki demandi jongje ki lam chakya chenpo la tene ani dima tata dang tendo dal songba ki tene ngowo dongba ranshin sawa da toje kunjab ki dangi sena mindu kantar dima tata dang dalwe ki nime ki yishe jorwa o di kararesana chugu se jorwa di ani kararesana jebure sumbare.
And then finally the result. What is the result? So these temporary stains are again only temporarily covering up or obscuring this luminous nature of the mind. But it's through the path of Mahamudra, this great Vajrayoga of Mahamudra, that these stains can be, we could say, permanently abandoned, permanently cleared away, so that the nature which is luminous, the essence which is empty, and then the activity which is this great compassion or manifest ability, this can shine through when the path is applied and all the stains are cleared away. And what then that is what we call the non-dual wakefulness or non-dual primordial wisdom. And that itself, that manifestation of that wisdom itself is what we call, as it states here, we manifest the result of purification, the stainless Dharmakaya. So the Dharmakaya itself is the result.
Laso tatini ta kazang anzu semgi keje sheyombe kapsula tulma tulgi keje sheyombe kapsula nezu nanzu gi keje sheyombe kapsula ta anzu tara duzingi shebala peshane da shubarwa ti pe yago yerba ta dila jarba ina tanda dila jangshi sejtwa 장시 세 semni 살동 송주디 가리 나신지레스나 빼나 ngoye nisul thakpa tere wa ngaran sula gare thongba ineya thongbare di ngoye nisul gare sen thakpa res dila jangshi isla bare deni thule dian thakpa la deni thuyung ro wa shi dila deni ta jongje se di gare sena dang anju thara dujing sheba di jingangke yongbe kapsula ta jigba de sebar jebala ngolin jene ta ngone thakwa redu mare du sene ta thapshe ge gone ta gu ro ba ta pena lokpa na re ya thile chinin gyuba ge tus jeba ene gangdar phajo doni tul thongsa de la chinne ji ko process ji ro ba doni ani di ta thapshe dam re ro ba thapshe de la karise go resana de kasba ba de la jongje sene la ba 다 장자디 가르레스나 댕기 땡도 둘 메바 강식라 로기드니 로부르두 둘도 토타샤베긴 둘저와 둘디 가스바바다 장자 차데 거래 다 덴데기드니 지바디 빵베 체돌라 아니 장시 탑에 땡돌라 종제게 탑두말라 때니 아니 ताजे तायों पे kapsula tini o ta ngone dani tita thakbare do she go chane men do deme ngarang deni nor ni thulni she do samne thakba di thongyong pe kapsula durgi chikpa de chawa ni me ba pang do ro wa dujing zima de pang do gore thulba de pang do de la kare sa ne jang be debus la barta dul imba ngoshe pe ngothe be ko ne ani dujing gi sheba di be de korang me ba cha so ba tala tini nga zo debu slabare ta di pe de chane ning jobo wa du sam tang na
when we had previously talked about the mind, we used an example when we want to talk about the differences between a confused mind versus a non-confused mind or a correct mind. The mind can be thought about from the way things appear, the way it appears versus the way things actually are, as well as the mind from a subtle perspective versus a more coarse perspective. There was an example that we used that I think really helped talk about this. And so that example is the snake and the rope, right? And we can apply it right here to the ground and the means, and that which to abandon and the result, and that we find in the Mahamudra Aspiration prayer. So first, the ground. The ground is the unity of luminosity and emptiness. That's the way things actually are. That's the way things truly abide as they are. And we can say, oh, that's like the rope, right? The rope is the ground. And then on top of that, then there's this imputation, this temporary imputation due to a confused mind, which then imputes there existing a snake on top of that rope. But foundationally, or the basis of that, which is the rope, is the way it truly exists, right? And we equate that with the basis, which is this luminous, empty nature of mind. And the next is the means of purification, right? If we think we see a snake, we're going to have fear, we're going to be averse to it. But then if we want to face it and actually figure out whether or not there's actually a snake there, then that's when this process of, we could say, purification, right? Or investigation comes. Is it really a snake? You go, you approach it, you investigate, you might turn on a light, or you might poke it with a stick to try to see if it actually is or isn't a snake. And then it's through this process of investigation that one realizes, or that it's this, again, first, it's this process of investigation that we must go through. This is the means of purification. And there's so many ways of actually going about doing that, right? There's a lot of different means and ways of practice, etc., that we can go about in order to go through this purification. The third is what needs to be purified, right? Due to a confused mind and all the different kinds of causes and conditions that are needed in order to have that kind of confused mind, there's this imputation, right, of a snake. And that's purely a temporary appearance of a snake, right? Because it doesn't truly exist. But when we apply the methods of investigation, we recognize, oh, that doesn't exist. That snake isn't actually there. It's only a rope. I was wrong. And it's through that process of investigation, then that which needs to be abandoned, this temporary clinging to there being a snake, is naturally given up. There's no support for it, because you've done the investigation and you realize, oh, I was completely wrong. I was just mistaken. I was confused, right? So that snake becomes that which is to be abandoned. And so it's this, and it's through the introduction, we could say, of the nature of the rope, the absence of there being a snake, that one gives rise to this confidence. And so that's what we call the result, right? It's through this process that we then recognize the way things truly are.
다 될라더니 단다 장자디 루부르세 시도와 니디 빼들 인저보도와 빼나 낭출라 둘 통발에 이내양 네술라 탁바라와 제자 둘디 루부르 차송래 계란게 가수 통바 있네야 윤중보 가수 통바 있네야 가뒤 있네야 탁바디 둘 차요 말해 와 가르에서나 둘디고 출발에 탁바디 덴바라와 덴바단 출발이 벤순 네술공을라 저거 말 덴바디 덴바란데 그러와 다더니 강들 낭술란 둘다도 통바 있네야 뇌기 땡돌라 탁바디 가뒤에는 탁뱅어 마도 둘궁어라 마규바인 바데데 데마디 루부르와 신델라 바래.
So this isn't a very elegant example, right? So for example, that which needs to be purified are these temporary stains. And when we apply the example, right, from the way things appear immediately to us, we think we see a snake, right? But then throughout all of that, the actual reality of the situation is that it's only a rope, right? And the implication we can make is that however much you look at it and you really think that it's a snake, no matter how long you're convinced that what you see in front of you is actually a snake, it's never going to become a snake, right? There's no opportunity for something that doesn't exist to then exist, right? The snake is only based on a confused misinterpretation. It's incorrect, right? It's an incorrect assumption. The rope, on the other hand, is true, right? You can never have something that is true become something which is not true, and vice versa. You can never have something that's not true become true. So from the immediate way that things might appear, the actual nature of that, the actual nature of what you're experiencing, is none other than the way things actually are in essence, right? You can only the essence, the actual reality of the way things are can only ever be true the way things are.
Di ta ngazu di luburse chigdi chidang bebala yang kale khaboyare tini injila temporary secure barawa kapkabla advantageous secure du den serbe ini ta kowa de kande lengo resana pena nganzulan dul nang be kapsula takwa di dul yimi kimsel na tene nganzula dul nang ma mares ngarang zu tulbe ge pa swe sha bare sti ko le ko garta tikam su lobur se dra dimadi tulbeki sueshakwa mato nisul ni chu jungshakwa mares di kowasle buwarda pena duldi tabak sueshakwa marwa sueshena tonghe migi pa sueshakwa wa dimadi tende chires ta di kowasle buwarda. Its influence, it's how does kind of like the it's yeah, the kind of like what kanda dimadi tulbeki pa sueshakwa mato nilugni chu jungshakwa chu tongshakwa marese.
In when we translate this, the term is lobor in Tibetan. In English, we can translate it as temporary, but it's commonly more commonly translated as adventitious. And so again, when we talk about this idea of being adventitious or temporary, we can think about the snake. The snake does not appear due to the rope. The rope does not somehow produce this appearance of the snake in any means. It's not on behalf, we could say. It's not from the side of the rope that then there comes to be this appearance of a snake. And why do we see a snake? Why is there a snake when it's actually a rope? It's because it comes from essentially ourselves. It comes from this confusion, this misinterpretation, this misapprehension. It's due to the power, to the causes and conditions surrounding this confusion that then we project out there to be a snake. And so again, we can say it's not from the side of the rope. It has nothing to do with being a snake. There's nothing about the rope that then produces or appears as a snake, but comes from, it's influenced, it's generated through this confusion that then there's this temporary misapprehension that there's a snake out there.
Tadi hopes labdi yang kecheti kensabu rabuche kosegre ngajo namju lamsang kawala blame jigesena takwala blame jigirwa marwa hopes tadi dine rabuche reta duldi takbe soye shapo so rabuche tongorwa ina samlo yakbodana takwadan dul kaka ko dewa yo mare chasang de ngajo takbar la duldu tulbege semjorwa niz인jorwa 다 거기 내가 제샤 차상차 되 그래 딘디 도르디나 루브리 세드 그래 tul바디 아니 소소게 겐케 거마도 탁베 땡라더니 블렘지기요 말해서 와 this sense of responsibility 케고레스 라버다 다디네 고아디 탑시 당겨도 빼 고녀고도 간디 쉬쉬입니다.
So an aspect of this idea of adventitious or temporary, we can talk about this idea of responsibility. Where does the responsibility lie within this relationship that we have with a snake out there and the rope? Immediately, we have this gut reaction to want to kind of blame the rope for looking like a snake, right? Because it's out there. There's this immediate sense that it's something about that rope that made it look like a snake. We don't immediately think about our own kind of confusion. There's this gut reaction to blame outwardly. But then when we start thinking about it, there's absolutely no connection between the snake and the rope. So the rope is not to be blamed for why we thought we saw a snake out there. right? It's actually this dualistic mind which then there being a rope, based on that rope, that basis of the rope, on top of that there's this projection that comes from a subjective confusion that we then impute a snake out there. So when we talk about this idea of temporary or advantageous, it's really emphasizing this idea of where the responsibility lies. And when we have this idea of temporary, it's the responsibility lies for the confusion on this dualistic mind. It's there that we should blame what's this confusion, not something out there in the world.
Tende de tang an yam ngarang tu semji rangshin de wasal re ngi dewar shepe nyingbo yereslam na tangbo lamsan diwa di kare yong to tende na nga dunga gari chini nyang de bare sene diwa leg do wa lamsa je semji rangshin wasal 거기 내가 가르치니 지게요 말해서 blame 콜라 leg do wa ko thakba ina tene nge 가르치니 줄 통발에 했을 때 thak발 라베미도 와 thakba 있네야 줄be 방기 소소기다 줄 통샤 걸어 semji rangshin wasal ene 소소 또 마토 바래 아니 라서 마인 바치라 도타샤요래 봐 데데티우드니 wasal 임발라 임발 거 마시니 wasal main bachi ngazu dota샤 거 다 타바 임발라 타바 임발 거 마시 바 삼지 마이 데덴도 둘레 선지 도타샤 거 봐
So what we're saying here is this: the nature of mind is this empty luminosity, this unity of emptiness and luminosity. We also call it the Buddha nature. But we might have the reaction to be like, well, if that's the case, if that's the way that really the mind is, the way that the nature is, then why am I suffering? Why all this suffering? Why do I feel this way? You might ask, well, what's the purpose of having this nature, which is luminous and empty, when I feel like this? What's it doing for me, right? And we kind of do the same thing with the rope, right? We look out, and we see a snake, and then we forget, it was a rope, but it's like we have this gut reaction to blame the rope, that there's something kind of wrong with the rope, or it's at fault for why we were confused, right? But essentially it comes down to, we don't recognize luminosity for luminosity. We don't recognize nature of mind for the nature of mind. We confuse it for something else. We see it as something which it is not. The same thing we did with the rope. We didn't see the rope for a rope. We saw the rope for something that it was completely not. It was a snake. And so this is this basic misinterpretation or confusion that comes with this.
Tadordina ngaranjogi sambala denla tak바이나 ngage tak바랑 통고 그래와 samsamno shung도 와. 근데 용거요 말에 denla tak바 임바 간실라 ngaranjogi tak바 마임바 줄 초거라. 내가 나시 denla 외사바이나 아니 단다양 외사바 인고 그래와 통고 그래와 세숑도 와. 띠 용거요 말에 가르스나 바르들 출바게 바르도 줘대요 와. 띠인데 ngaranjo다 단다 셈기라시는 외사바 철마 되베디 셈기라신 외사바 마임바 때는 아주 마설바 말에 셈기라신 임발라 임바 뭐 맞더니 되니 셈기라신 뭐 맞더니 개발도 와 배나 루징기 셰바 개발 개온데 가서라 타바 마임바라 때니 타바디 가르래 타바 마임바 때니 아주 뒤게 말아봐 타바랑 알아봐 이는 타바라 타바 임바 뭐 마시나 그 타바 있네야 내가 지금이도 와 다 근데 지금 삼당도 그거 띠인데 이민세당 못쳐 마르세니 개발 용도도 봐. 임바점지 디기요 말 못쳐 그거 그래. 탁바 임바점지 디기미도 봐. 탁바 임바 못시 그거도 봐. 뭐 마시는 거 내가 지금이도 봐. 내가 나서 셈기 뭐서 인세 되는 식으로.
We might also have the question, well, if it's for example, in the snake and the rope, if it's true that it was actually, if it's true that it's a rope, then why did I not see it as that way? Why did I see it as something else? If it's really the way it is, then shouldn't I see a rope for a rope? Why would I see it for something else? But that's not always the case. We're certainly allowed to, so to say, see something for what it is not, right? So the same thing with the nature of mind, the luminous nature of mind. You might ask, well, if that's the way things, if it's true that the nature of the mind is luminous, and that's the way things are, then why don't I see it that way, right? Why do I see it say something else that it's not? And so what's happening here is, again, you're certainly allowed, all right? The possibility is there for you to see the nature of mind as something that it is not. And what is doing that is the confusion. The confusion is coming in between you and seeing the things the way they are, right? So it's not that the rope, for example, is not a rope, and that's why you saw it as something else. The rope was a rope. It's always been a rope, but due to the confusion, you see it as something else. The nature of the mind is the nature of mind. Luminosity is luminosity. It's not that luminosity was something else, and that's why you saw it as something else. It's there. You didn't see it because there was confusion, and so that's called recognition, right? You didn't recognize the rope for a rope. That's why you mistook it for something else. We didn't recognize the nature of mind, luminosity, as the nature of mind, which is luminosity, and therefore we saw it as something else. So there's a big difference between being something being what it is versus not recognizing it due to confusion and seeing it as something else.
Tindu yinna ngoshebe kyaba yo mare.
Okay.
Ngomashena maimbe kyaba mindowa.
Ngomashena.
Pena ngaran zogi ngeki semge ranshin wasa insa mare karesen nge churgu mindos ngazo lapcho gorwa. Ti kyaba yo mare.
Okay.
Pena di thaba insa mare karesen nge thaba thongu mindu lamna ngoy nisula dogu mindowa.
So we can say that if something is what it is, that does not mean that you have to see it as that. If something is something, that does not mean you have to see it as that. It's not in all cases would you see something for what it is. However, if you don't recognize it for what it is, in all cases, all circumstances, you're not going to see what it is. You're not going to recognize it for what it is. You're going to mistake it as for something else. And so that is say like the antidote for this gut feeling, this feeling that if you might experience something and you think it is the way it is because that's the way you experienced it. But we have to recognize that that's not the way it is in all cases. There are certainly cases when you can experience something, but you experience it for what it is not. You experience it as something which it is not. And so there's a difference here.
Tide kusam malam nala rik da marik chudul te sungoto ba. Sidi sama korwa ta nyangde se nyipati kaga yo mares la bare. The line jerwa line jera korwa ta nyangde ni line de kaba yore sona ngoshye ba da mashe ki kebare ma do che korwa se ne dubu ji nyangde se ne yakbo ji ne pe ji kaga de che yo mares la bare. Ngo mashe ne korwa cha song re ngoshye ba di nyangde cha song res la bare.
There's a line in the Aspiration prayer of Kunta Sampo which draws the line between the way we experience things, and that it says something to the effect that these manifest appearances, the manifestations are those of knowing versus not knowing. And what we mean by that is, for example, not knowing, what happens when we don't know, we don't recognize the way things are, that's what we call samsara. When we do recognize the way things are as they are, that's called nirvana. And so the point here is that it's not saying that there's some fundamental difference between samsara and nirvana. It's not that fundamentally samsara is bad and it's something not to like. It's not fundamentally saying that nirvana is something good, something that we need, that it is to be liked. It's essentially just the difference, the difference between recognizing versus not recognizing. Recognizing is nirvana. Not recognizing is samsara.
Ta de tu sa de zo de similar to go yo ba yin du tini cha jin malam gen dang la do tam ji similar cho par sho se chi yore na yang similar to yang similar de ge yang similar ga yang ram gi sa tu yang similar do yang similar de do tam ji similar cho par sho se to tul se ni ga tu sa de similar to go ro ba and the word say.
One second, I'm trying to find the one verse. Okay, I found it. And so the main point is that what the Mahamudra aspiration prayer is pointing to is that it all comes down to the mind. It all comes down to the recognition of the mind. And verse 14 really emphasizes this point when it says, appearance is mind, emptiness is also mind, realization is mind, confusion is also mind, birth is mind, cessation is also mind. May we cut through all doubts about mind. So this the last line, may we cut through all doubts about mind. So it's showing, it's pointing directly, focusing that it all comes down to this recognition of mind.
So, ta dering dot dina dine nga zu shiba tende ki ta lamde nyamsul lembe de kapsula dine ta dangbo di ta lam ge domshi da wadala jangshi jongje jangja jangde sene ta tende chik dine nga zu yewa che ko go re se ta dinani dine dangbo nga zu jangshi se de ta samlo mangbo chi tango ko wa semni sadong sungju re se de di lela bo ya mare ngara zu semna doba mangbo chi ngo re ngara zu la nangsu ma do nesu di kyuni da nyong tu go ya mare wa di ndi de ni to sma se shi da bu chi shu ba yin.
So what we discussed today was the practice from the perspective of the path, when we divide things up between the ground of purification, the means of purification, that which is to be purified, and then the result of purification. These four divisions. And today we talked about specifically the first one, the ground or basis of purification, as the unity, the union of luminosity and emptiness. And as beginners, this is a hard point to kind of have a lot of faith in, or maybe trust, meaning you might have some doubts, a lot of doubts about what this means and how this could be true, because essentially we spend all of our time in the dimension which we see and take things to be the way they are only by the appearance, but due to the mere appearance of the way things are. And we're not used to, we haven't really cultivated or familiarized ourselves with this idea of the way things are actually in converse to the way things merely appear. So that's why it might be difficult in the beginning and we might have doubts.
Tadi sim sa wasa resu do mo bo yongwa wa an telata nangsu ni su cho ni sa no tango gre sing ti su se shi shu ba yin.
And so because it's likely that we might have doubts about this very important point of the nature of mind being luminous and empty, that if we think about it from the perspective of the way things appear versus the way things are, then I think we can clear up some of those doubts.
Janju semju rimbo che mage panam ke gyure che ke ba nyambara me ba yang gong ne gong do bel var sho